Chapter 12 Settle Your Dust. Xiao Xingjin's clothes were the wrong color, which was a constant annoyance at the corner of his eye. A bleached off-white, more dust than stardust, nowhere near moonlight enough. Well, what could you expect, allowing a fierce corpse to help him pick them out? Xu bitterly wondered. Songlan's eyes were technically Xiao Xingjin's, so they probably weren't at fault. Clearly, the mistake had been made somewhere between those eyes and the clumsy paw the man used for communication. Probably in that nail-scrambled brain, or what remained of it. Idiot. When pointed out, Xiao Xingjin had just looked surprised, smiled slightly, and said that they should be grateful for the new whole cloth that the two Dao Shi had collected from a temple in Tanzhou a few days before leaving. Maintained the color wasn't important, said that they were comfortable. You could probably pull a potato sack over that man's head and he'd smile, gracious, and be thankful for the kind gift. There was in fact nothing comfortable about plain cotton, except possibly the airiness of the material. It was rough and unrefined against skin, itched like childhood. Even during the long years in disguise, he'd preferred a few layers of silk under the humbler outer robes, for comfort and, admittedly, perhaps just a touch of vanity. His new robes might be a lot less bloodied and torn to shreds, but they were as drab as Songlan's, and they itched. And Xiao Xingjin's were the wrong color. Is everything all right? He very nearly told Xiao Xingjin in excruciating detail exactly how much things were not all right, complete with a few choice expletives that would definitely not have been well received, but managed to catch his lip between his teeth in time to hold it back. Pulled on a sickly sweet smile instead. They had already had this exact argument 3 times since morning, and 4 was probably pushing even Xiao Xingjin's patience. Perfectly fine, Dao Zhang. If you need to rest. He did flash his teeth in frustration at that, knowing it couldn't be seen, except by Songlan, who was utterly unimportant. I'm keeping up just fine. You're burning through your G reserves fast, just to stay on your feet. I prefer staying on my feet. It's so hard to crawl when you only have one hand, he hissed, which made Xiao Xingjin flinch back just slightly. Well, he really only had himself to blame, the way he wouldn't stop poking where his opinion wasn't wanted. We can stop and rest more often. Don't patronize me, Xu turned and snarled, tipping over into fury. Don't you fucking dare look down on me. You think I'm something so weak and helpless I need your condescension? You should know by now I'm not. Don't think I couldn't rip your throat out in a heartbeat. If I wanted you dead, you'd lie dead and grey and cold in a coffin. Gone. He stumbled back, feet suddenly unsteady. Caught the flat glare from Songlan, who was already pointedly holding Fushu in hand. He caught his balance, bared all his teeth in a murderous, not really smile. Just keep walking, Xiao Xingjin. It's fine. Xiao Xingjin had the gall to look upset, but finally pressed his lips together and resumed his pace. He looked deeply thoughtful for quite some time. Actually, he said a few silent minutes later, as though he was trying the words on his tongue before letting them out. I think I'd like some rest. The forest sounds tranquil here. I would like to stop and meditate for a while. Which could just possibly be the most painfully transparent attempt at subterfuge the world has ever witnessed. Xu was torn between his anger, disbelief, and an explosion of laughter, just barely caught before it made it past his teeth. Songlan briefly closed his eyes, and he just knew it was to keep from rolling them, his nostrils actually flaring once. Meditate. Yes, Xiao Xingjin confirmed serenely. The wind in the trees is very pleasant. The look Songlan shot him spoke as clearly as any scratches in the gravel. Don't you dare say a word, as though he would ever dissuade Xiao Xingjin from his precious, floundering attempts at manipulation. He gave a soundless laugh, full of teeth in return, before turning back to the person who actually mattered. Oh, very well, if you insist, Dao Zhang. But we'll never get anywhere if you keep slowing us down like this, really. Xiao Xingden's small smile outshone the sun. Thank you. Xu Yang couldn't hold back the laughter in his voice. The man looked so pleased with himself. There is a wellspring a few li ahead, Dao Zhang. It would be a better place to rest. I'm sure the wind in the trees is every bit as pleasant there. If you could resist the urge to meditate a stick of incense longer. Xiao Xingden nodded solemnly. Then we'll stop to rest there. 3 li, 4 at most. He could do that. Walking did burn through his feeble chi a lot faster than he liked, regrettably needed to keep himself upright. Keep the pain of a body unforgivably slow to heal, enough at bay to put one foot in front of the other. But pushing through, staying active had always helped it replenish faster in the past. 3 li, certainly no more than 4. And then sitting down for some mind-numbingly boring meditation for an hour or two might not be a bad idea after all. Xiao Xingden made very, very sure not to smile. Managing the needs, demands, and boisterous tempers of Ah Ching and Cheng Mei on a daily basis had often felt like juggling 24 greased eggs at once. He had learned. Managing Xu Yang might be a lot more like juggling knives on fire, but there was enough of an overlap between him and the false persona he had once presented that at least some of the ways to handle him still seemed to work, if deployed with care. Zichen brushed his wrist, and he raised his hand to listen. Meditation? He remembered that his friend's face seldom showed his wry amusement, even before, when he could see it, but he had known it anyways, could all but feel it in his touch now, before the man let his hand fall away again. He just smiled, a very small smile. Push it too far, make Xu Yang feel ridiculed, and he would likely rip someone's throat out. Or, perhaps more likely, die horribly in that failed attempt. Neither an alternative he wished to risk. Is it far? He asked instead, hopefully forestalling Xu Yang slipping back into his bad mood. Just up the hill, the man replied, and thankfully he still sounded amused rather than angry. Is it growing hard to keep the cravings for meditation in check, Dao Zhang? He smiled wider, openly, because it was all rather amusing. I think I can manage, but thank you for your concern. A scoff somewhere between scorn and mirth was his only reply. You're familiar with this road? I can't remember that we've ever headed this far east together. Carefully not mentioning night hunts for monsters or fierce corpses. Things better left unspoken. This is the main eastern road from Yi City, shortest way to civilization, Xu Yang replied casually. I came through here every time I was heading out, or coming home. Coming back. Every time? He couldn't help but be curious. Somehow he hadn't envisioned Xu Yang leaving, insofar as he had envisioned anything at all about those lost years in nothingness. You traveled often? There was just a moment of silence at that, and he wondered if he had inadvertently hit a sore enough spot to bring out the anger again. But when Xu Yang spoke up, he sounded distant at most. I scoured the world for spells and rituals to wake you up, to at least talk to you. Not that any of that helped. Another short silence, and then another of those little derisive scoffs. And I had a lot of work to do. Had to turn to some old friends for help eventually. And as it turns out, raising the dead is the kind of favor that comes with a hefty price tag. Had to spend a lot of time getting my hands very dirty. Something about the tone made him shudder to the core. I don't want to know about this, do I? No, you really don't. Much better if you don't, actually. A shorter silence, and he could guess at a sharp smile, even though there was no sound. So many years making nasty messes and cleaning others up, all in return for petty scraps that might lead somewhere. 7, almost 8 years. You were being so very stubborn. I really should be very upset with you. You're fortunate I'm so forgiving. Why? Why you should count yourself fortunate? Oh, Dao Zhang, I should think you'd know by now. Why did you spend all those years trying to bring me back? A long, absolute silence followed, as if the world had fallen silent, stopped, and he instantly regretted asking. That was one of those too big, too sharp questions he had carefully held tucked away in his heart. Not entirely ready, possibly never ready to ask it out loud or receive the answer. A bad miscalculation in that precarious juggling act, and now he could only brace for the knives to start coming down. You weren't supposed to be dead. Not really an answer at all, and Xu voice was off, in a way he couldn't decipher. Something pooled under his ribs, flaring, biting anger, and something cold, almost like fear, or maybe yearning. For a second, the scar on his throat made it hard to swallow. You didn't sound like you cared back then, that day. Xu stopped short, but didn't make a sound. He suddenly wished more than anything that he could see the look on his face, know something, anything of what he was thinking. Tear his own life's mismatched missing puzzle pieces out of his silence. You said you deceived me all along, he pushed, knowing he probably shouldn't, but it wasn't fair that he was expected to be the patient one. He, if anyone needed, deserved answers. You said that my trying to make the world better was a real joke, that it was all for fun. Is that all it was? All this is? Fun? Another long silence, even the wind holding its breath. He could feel Shuanghua quiver restlessly in its sheath at the nearby growing resentment of Zichen's anger. You think I would run myself ragged for nearly 8 years for the sake of some private joke? When Xu finally spoke, his voice was strangled, furious, and maybe something else entirely. He couldn't guess, was suddenly not sure he wanted to, only remembered that the very last thing he had heard in death was laughter. With you, I honestly couldn't tell. Xu made a noise, something breathless, like a laugh, but too rugged and uneven. Ah, I guess you caught me. Of course it was all for fun. What else could it be? It didn't sound like fun. Not at all. Xiao Xingjin suddenly felt so very tired of constantly having to guess and wrestle, having to dig and claw and bury his hands to the elbows in whatever Xu said to sift forth any small thing resembling truth. You called yourself Cheng Mei, he shot bitterly, because that had chafed for a long time. Someone helping others do good. Was that a part of the joke too? Another long silence, but when Xu finally answered, the strangled tone was almost gone, and he just sounded bemused. It's my name. That was perhaps the one answer he hadn't expected. Your name? My curtsy name. Suddenly a soft laugh, not really happy, just a bit too shrill, but still a lot more grounded than his voice only moments ago, ready to clench down hard on the changed subject like a striking talons of a bird of prey. You have to have a proper curtsy name to live at the poison garden court of Jinling Tai. Didn't you know? I was a gift, my talents an offering to make the old asshole Zongque happy, gain my generous friend Liang Fangzhen the status and influence he so craved. He was the one I was supposed to help. Gave me that pretty name to make sure I wouldn't ever forget it. He laughed yet again, or maybe had never really stopped, so softly now, fondly, as though he was the sweetest person in the world, someone capable of fondness. Oh, Daojang, joke was at my expense, not yours. They were good times, with the Jin. I wouldn't say they weren't. But I liked helping you better. I stayed with you, didn't I? Helping make monsters out of innocence for him to fight. But then, helping fight real monsters. Helping repair the roof. Helping buy and carry groceries. Helping him find his joy and laughter again when he was at his loneliest. Helping him rise from the same cold death he had so brutally consigned Ah Ching to. Suddenly there were fingers reaching for his own, and he flinched back on instinct before recognizing the cool touch, quickly grasped the hesitating hand before it could pull away again. Zichen. Let's find that place to rest. Only now did he realize how disoriented he felt. No answers the richer, more at a loss than before. He became aware of a faint sound, like metal scraping in the dust, and guessed, not without a sting of discomfort, that Zijin signed something for Xu Yang to see. Xu Yang, who had finally fallen silent despite, or maybe because of it. He nodded at Zijin in tired agreement. "We'll keep walking to the wellspring? We can rest there." The wind was rustling in the trees, sunlight warm, the world turning gently, ever drifting down the river of the universe. Not stopped and still, after all. "Fuck Ching Mei, to be honest," he heard Xu Yang say quietly, apparently having stepped a few paces away. He got to have it all, but the moment the lacquer is scraped off enough for some Xu Yang to show, it's all over. The good places of the world have no room for something like me. The bottomless bitterness left the silence ringing, metallic and acerbic. Zijin's hand on his twitched once, angry. "Come on then, Daojang. The wellspring is just up ahead, and we couldn't have you miss out on your afternoon meditation." Xiao Xingjin slowly started walking again, in silence, holding onto Zijin's hand like it was the one last real thing in the world. He felt like someone had taken all the carefully laid out pieces of his lost life's puzzle and scattered them back into chaos again. Blooper? The wind in the trees is very pleasant. I think I can manage, but thank you for your concern.